field line. Tucker comes out. Kyle Tucker. This time they're going to set it up.
Good evening, good afternoon, good morning, whenever the fuck you're watching. This is our week 3 review, week 4 preview for the Rosinbaggers podcast brought to you by Backyard Sports. Ty, how you doing, bud?
What's going on? It's a random Thursday podcast edition here.
That it is.
Pod. I had to check my calendar, check my watch, make sure I had my P's and Q's all taken care of. We've got a lot to talk about, though. Like, it's a Thursday, and, you know, everybody's sitting there, and they're like, oh, my God, it's so early. What are you guys talking about baseball for? Talk to me in October. We had a slow news day today in baseball world. Tatis is back. Phil Cuzzi is still a prick. Madison Bumgarner's career appears to be done, and the A's are moving to Vegas. We're going to talk about it all here on the pod.
Absolutely, absolutely. So I want to jump right out the gates, and I want to get your thoughts on this Oakland A's thing.
Yeah.
Because I've been very vocal, and I'm going to say it again. I hope for the absolute worst for this ownership group. This owner is maybe the worst in all of sports, maybe outside of Dan Snyder for how hated Dan Snyder actually is. But for all of Dan Snyder's faults, he didn't try to alienate an entire city, an entire fan base, and his own team just to move the team out of town and get a new stadium. So I hope for whatever reason, I don't give a shit what reason, I hope it gets blocked and he can't build a stadium. And I hope MLB steps in and takes the fucking team away from him, honestly. And I mean that with all sincerity. He should not own a professional sports franchise. Ty, what are your thoughts?
Vegas, the city of lights, Sin City, as they call it. All of those things aside, does not deserve a Major League Baseball franchise. This to me is a lot like the movie Major League, only in this particular movie, the bad guys win. And that's a really shitty ending to what has been a horrible, tragic story for that entire fan base and really for the baseball community at large. A ownership group that saw a potential light at the end of a tunnel, basically sold the entire franchise off 2 years ago, has been nothing short of pocketing the change, not investing it back into the Oakland community, not giving it back to the baseball franchise, and sure as hell not giving the fans any value for their time and commitment over the last 2 years. And it all goes into his checking account. And then at the end of this incredibly sad story, they sell to a MLB franchise to a city that is just giving you dollars and cents. It's not actually giving you any intrinsic value from the standpoint of a community sense, which is really where I think that baseball has grown the best in communities that have really adopted these teams and have made them a part of their daily operations. Vegas doesn't have that, and it never will. It's a tourist attraction, and yes, the glitz, the glamour has been kind of smoke and mirrors on the NHL franchise with the Vegas Golden Knights and what they've been able to accomplish, but there's no real connection with that city to that particular franchise. It's just something to do. And I don't want a baseball franchise. I don't want a baseball team to be something that is just fun to do if you happen to be in Vegas and are tired of losing at the poker tables and just sneak out to go see an A's game. That's not and never will be in any of the communities that had the potential to get a Major League Baseball franchise. Your Nashvilles, your Charlottes, we're screwed in this process. And I'm with you. At the end of the day, Major League Baseball is probably not going to step in the way of a big time financial mogul like the community of Las Vegas, which, let's be honest, Vegas has the dollar signs, Vegas has the money, Vegas has the ability and the space in their city to build a stadium and to build something that is an attractive brand for Major League Baseball. But there is no longevity there. There's no staying power. There's no value. It's going to be kind of what is Vegas going to do? They're going to turn it into a production of sorts. And that's not really what any of us want to see from a Major League Baseball franchise. That's not what we want to see when it comes to building and growing the game. I'm not a big fan of this. And I put it in the group chat and I put it on my own social media pages. I roll emojis times a million, times infinity here. And we kind of knew it was going to go in this direction because when it comes down to dollars and cents, nobody can pony up what Vegas can do. But it's not going to be as successful as I think that Major League Baseball has maybe this pie in the sky number or idea of what this is going to be. I don't see it panning out. I don't see it working. And I really hope that 29 other owners also see that and say, let's block this. Let's get in this way. I'm not saying that the franchise should or needs to stay in Oakland. It needs to go away, but it needs to be removed, first of all, from this ownership group. If you can get it removed from this ownership group, you can take a look at potential relocation opportunities, and there are several marketable long-term options available that Major League Baseball needs to go first. But Vegas is sure as hell not the place. Not in my book, and not in a million years. And I think it's a shame. I think it's a horrible ending to what was a terrible story. That's, for me, a black eye so far on the season. That's a gut punch. Vegas, of all, I would have been ecstatic anywhere else in the United States, not Vegas.
Yeah, and I think the one thing Major League Baseball might miss here is with an NHL stadium, you're selling 13,000 tickets. I think it is the average size of an NHL stadium, right? It's like a basketball game. Tickets are high priced. They're hard to get into. It's an event, right? LA,
Pack 'em in.
Miami. It's why those teams thrive in those cities, because it's an exclusivity type thing. Major League Baseball doesn't offer that, right? For all of the, I want to sit behind home plates, there's 59,000 other seats that have to be filled in a stadium. And for a team that's leaving Oakland because supposedly they couldn't sell tickets, you couldn't sell tickets because you put a shit product on the field. Let's be honest.
Yep.
You also were the fourth most profitable team last year because you put a shit product on the field. You also are the fourth biggest market in Major League Baseball behind New York, LA, and Chicago. It's absurd. It's absurd. So for me, I just look at it and I say, Major League Baseball, I think they're overlooking a lot of these aspects that Vegas doesn't offer a nice fertile soil for baseball. And you mentioned Nashville, you mentioned Charlotte as two other cities that were in contention. San Antonio is another city that's really hungry for another pro sports franchise. Maybe it wasn't baseball. I think they're going to get another franchise somewhere down the line. I just don't know what Major League Baseball was thinking, other than the fact that this owner had identified Vegas and maybe wasn't going to back down from moving to Vegas. I mean, I don't think it's even been chartered or anything, and he just went and bought the land. I mean, you can afford to go buy a $20 million piece of property in Vegas, but you can't put Major League Baseball players on the field. They've got a AA roster basically playing Major League Baseball this year, with the exception of a few players. They do have a couple of guys that can play, but good fucking that team has. They're about to set some records for futility. Honestly, they've got an historically bad run differential to this point. They've got an historically bad ERA to this point. They can't hit the ball. They can't move runners. They can't score runs. It's going to be really ugly. It's going to be really bad. And I wouldn't be surprised if that team vastly underperformed the Nationals and was the worst team in baseball. They might struggle to win 40 games this year. That's how bad they look right now.
I got them capped right now at 25. Like, I'm going to be really honest.
That's probably the right number, though, as bad as it's been.
I don't see it. I don't see over 25 at this point from Oakland.
It's so bad.
And you mentioned, like,
what is the record? It's like 142 or something, right?
Yeah.
For losses?
142, maybe.
Could you imagine sitting through a season like that?
No.
And Oakland's about to do it.
Mm-hmm. And you mentioned, like, the AA roster, right? And you well, for the exception of some guys. Well, the exception of some guys, some guys that you mentioned that have that exception are probably AAA players. Like, it's not a Major League Baseball roster. It is not competitive, and it is not, and it was never designed to be. No. And it was a joke from the word go. And the fact that there has been some fans that have stuck through that and with that and put bags over their faces when they go into Rickey Henderson Field is astonishing. That there's more uprising from this, because this was a crime that took place in broad daylight that nobody stopped.
Yeah. 134, by the way. 134.
Yeah.
And they might get there. They might, and that was in a 154 game season. So Oakland's got 8 more games to tally a few more losses. On a little more positive note, my dad brings up the fact that your Cardinals playing a little better baseball, 5-5 in their last 10. They got off to a rocky start, starting to, play 500 baseball, and it's all uphill from here.
Grind the gears, man. Cardinals baseball right now looks a hell of a lot like my golf game does throughout the entire duration of my golf life, where you have maybe your driver's working okay, but you can't pitch and putt to save your life. Maybe the pitching and putting is on, and you're hitting dying.
My golf game,
but your drives are slicing off to the right. I mean, St. Louis has not put a complete game together. And their offense is so Jekyll and Hyde. It's 16 runs in one game, and then it's 4 straight games of maybe one, and you're scratching across to get that one run. The clutch hitting has been down. St. Louis, I mean, for the life of me, I've watched plenty of Cardinals baseball so far this year, and they've had the opportunities. They put runners in position. They've manufactured, and all they need is that one hit to break through and to get those runs across, and they have failed to do that. And then when all of those elements are working, when the batting is fine and we're hitting well, pitching goes to shit out of thin air. St. Louis and my golf game are peas in a pod right now, and neither one is very good. But yes, little improvement against a team that we feel that is going to make some noise in the National League this year with the Diamondbacks. So certainly that's encouraging. But then I just look at St. Louis's schedule right now for the Redbirds. I mean, my God, when you say strength of schedule, and I know it's not manufactured, and I know there's really not a stat for it, but St. Louis has had a pretty damn tough one to start off the year with your season opener to start off the season. Then you turn around and you play Toronto. You have the Atlanta Braves, then you go on the road and take on the Milwaukee Brewers. Then you get the Arizona Diamondbacks, which are a hot upstart team. And now, like, what does St. Louis get gifted? But Julio Rodriguez and the Seattle Mariners. So it's like right back. Like, we haven't had a breathable matchup at this point for St. Louis. We haven't had a breathable series where it's like, okay, we can kind of coast here. It's been tough, and I love it. But it's been battle tested. But again, I was talking to a Brewers fan today about the St. Louis schedule and where they're at in the standings. And I go, if you honestly believe that come September, St. Louis isn't going to be in the mix, you're fucking crazy, because they'll be there. Their lineup is talented enough and they're aggressive enough from a front office standpoint that if it's a guy that they're missing in the lineup or it's a manager change that needs to happen, they're going to do it.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so we're going to cover one more kind of newsy thing. And I don't know if you saw the breaking news in the last 2 hours, but Major League Baseball has made a critical error in judgment, in my opinion.
Okay.
Max Scherzer has received a 10-game suspension for quote unquote foreign substance. All right.
Good way to put it.
So the scenario plays out as such. Max is instructed to go wash his hands. He goes and washes his hands in front of a Major League Baseball official. Comes back out for the third inning and is told, you got to go wash your hands again. Your glove's sticky. You got to go change your glove, yada, yada, yada. Meanwhile, all of the eyes in the stadium are on him. Where's he getting a foreign substance? Oh, yeah. By the way, he's just picking up the rosin bag that's on the back of the mound.
Mm-hmm.
So he's kicked out of the game, and Major League Baseball, for some reason, has this propensity to blindly side with their umpires and their officiating crews, and they hand out this 10-game suspension that I just they're opening a Pandora's box for me, that because of who it is that handed out the ejection in the game. Now, let me lay it out for those of you out there that don't know this. There have been 3 players in Major League Baseball, 3 pitchers, that have been kicked out of a game for a foreign substance, sticky substance on their fingers, right? Since the inception of this sticky stuff ban, right? And I'm going to call it the Garrett Cole rule because that's what it is. It's the Garrett Cole rule. Garrett Cole's career changed trajectories when he found out that you could use Soul Glow on your fingers and get a lot more tackiness on the baseball, and you could get a rev rate. His went up like 30%. That's unbelievable. And the guy who blew the whistle, Trevor Bauer, is now blackballed by Major League Baseball. We've had that conversation on this show as well. He admitted to using it and said, hey, look at my numbers. I can tell you when I started using it. And I had the exact same change in rev rate as Garrett Cole, who was kind of his whipping boy for it. And I loved it because I fucking hate Garrett Cole for a lot of reasons. So 3 pitchers, since this ban was introduced in Major League Baseball and these random inspections were brought to the table, have been ejected from games. Ty, I'm going to give you one guess, and I know you know who it is, but for the viewers out there, who's the umpire for those 3 ejections? Is it the same guy? Is it 3 different guys?
Man, I'm pretty sure it's the same guy, and I'm pretty sure he's a prick, and I'm damn sure his name is Phil fucking Cuzzy.
Yeah. Same guy, known prick, as you said, wants to put on a show and be part of the broadcast any chance he gets, kind of like a Joe West. He's the guy who has found a reason to eject 3 guys, and Major League Baseball just blindly says, okay, we're going to suspend Max Scherzer. So I want to know your thoughts on this, because I think it's opening a dangerous, dangerous Pandora's box for Major League Baseball.
I think so, but in the same token, there's, when you take a look at the substance checks that have been applied and the amount of umpires that have tossed out guys, and at the end of the day, when it's only one umpire that's really taken this rule to an extreme, I mean, you take a look at, and there's some awful bad umpires that we've highlighted and discussed that have really shitty ass report cards when it comes to the strike zone, but they're not getting involved in the show enough to the point where they're integrating and inserting themselves as a part of the game. They're just simply really bad at strike zones. Where Phil Cuzzy is like, I'm a Major League Baseball umpire, and I look back at the Scherzer incident and I look back at Bumgarner's incident that happened last year.
Yep.
And in both of those scenarios, if you take the tape back and watch the game slowly develop to when these ejections took place, it wasn't necessarily the guys on the mound showing up Phil Cuzzy, but it was a clear, egregious frustration where they snapped the ball back. They took another lap around the mound. They kind of gave him a little extra stare, and Phil Cuzzy goes, oh, yeah? Okay, well, watch.
I've got a weapon in my arsenal.
Next half inning, I'm going to check your fingers. I'm going to do it really awkwardly and stare at you while I'm doing it, and then I'm going to toss you. But on the flip side, and here is where I will play devil's advocate and almost counter this to a point. The fact that you say Pandora's box, and I agree wholeheartedly. Yes, it does. But there's the option to appeal the suspension, which for whatever reason, Scherzer didn't do. And I don't know if it's the fact that it's a 10-game suspension and he's only going to miss one start and he doesn't want to go through the trials and tribulations and the heavy lifting of an appeal process. But if it was truly the Rosinbag and Sweat, like he said, then you appeal the damn thing and put this to bed before it becomes an issue. I was blown away by news that Scherzer and his agent decided not to appeal the suspension. And again, I'm not saying that justifies Phil Cuzzy's ejection in this situation and in this scenario, but I am saying that if it was Rosin and Sweat, I would be immediate appeal process and try to get this from being something that future pitchers have to deal with, because I would have felt that the appeal process would have put that immediately to bed and been like, that's Rosin and Sweat. Phil Cuzzy, knock off your shit.
So devil's advocate to that, how do you prove that on appeal?
That's a great question.
That's to me, I always there's some circumstances in these professional sports that, yes, the player does win on appeal, and it's usually like this, I don't know, odd interpretation of kind of the CBA, right, is usually what ends up being the reason they win on appeal. Some players in the past have won on banned substance appeals because of mishandling and they ruined people's careers. Richard Sherman, looking at you, you fucking dickhead. I just don't know how you appeal this, right? And I wonder if the union, the league, his representation, the team, all said the same thing that you said, right? You're going to miss one start, you'll be back,
right?
Blah, blah, blah. I wonder how you would appeal such a thing, because you can't after the fact, right, say like, oh, there's video evidence of, I never touched anything, because you're not on camera, the entire time. So I wonder if there's a little bit of that too. But your point's absolutely correct, that I would have thought that there would have been some sort of appeal. But again, how do you appeal it? I don't know. Do you just go through the process to clear your name, right? To assert that you're trying to clear your name, maybe. But if you lose on appeal, does that look worse? I don't know.
And throughout the appeal process, and then, by the time the appeal process rolls around and you're talking about midsummer and maybe your team's in a playoff race by midsummer, and you certainly don't want to miss a start in the middle of the summer versus missing a start in the early season. But to your point, though, like you talk about not being on camera all the time, I would argue that you're on camera a hell of a lot more in 2023 than you ever were.
Oh, 100%.
Any appeal process. And I think that you could go back and at some point in time, somebody had a camera on you and you could wind up all that footage. But again, there was a lot of legwork. And from Max's standpoint, probably said, fuck it. Like, I'm not going to go through all that entire process only to have a potential to lose this appeal. But the message I think that needs to be loud and clear, especially to Phil Cuzzy, is knock off your shit.
Yeah.
Get out of the game. Be a home plate umpire. Do your job. Play your role. Stay in your lane. And especially don't fuck with the stars.
Yeah. Yeah.
Don't
I promise you, Major League Baseball and Phil Cuzzy, I have never once purchased a ticket or turned on a game in my life to see how the umpire's doing. I promise. The only time I notice the umpire is when he's fucking up like this.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So let's shift gears. I want to pass your way this week. You've got let's see. Actually, I think, I don't know if our overlays made it. Did they end up? Okay. So we're going to run from memory here.
Got it.
Because I think there was an issue with the overlays. So what series you looking forward to this week?
Are we talking about, are we doing the review or the preview?
Let's go review. Let's talk about last week.
All right, last week. Well, last week, of course, we had the streak with the Tampa Bay Rays as they were taking their undefeated streak into their first, let's be honest, real competition that they had in the 2023 baseball season. And as we both mentioned on the pod a week ago, we were saying, listen, the streak is probably going to end to Toronto because they got firepower. They got some pitching. Toronto will figure out how to make a series work and at least scrap across one. But not only Did they scrap across one? They got two, had a potential for a sweep on Sunday.
Almost.
And the Rays were able to pick up that Sunday getaway victory. But a lot of takeaways here, and it had, all of the intrigue and feel of a late AL East clash in the early portion of the season, because there was a lot riding on the line. There was a lot of storylines heading into the game. And certainly when you're taking on your AL East rival, when you're an AL East favorite going up against this hot up and coming team that all of a sudden is 6.5 games in front of everybody because they got off to a 13-0 start, you're going to pick up your game, and Toronto did that. But takeaways aside, the biggest thing that I noticed was, we've talked a lot on this pod about the Toronto offense, and the fact is that there's a lot of teams that are probably going to have to score 7 runs, 8 runs to beat this Toronto offense because they are loaded 1 through 9. My biggest takeaway from Toronto was, holy shit, can that team play some defense? And it begins and ends with Kevin Kiermaier, who may be the greatest defensive center fielder that I've watched. He is so damn good. And his routes that he was taking in this series were absolutely unbelievable. He was making plays that at the very crack of the bat, when you look at StatCast, were like 0.1% probability. And he was making them, look easy, scaling the wall multiple times, diving across the field, and albeit against his former team, which made it even sweeter. And every time he's grinning because he's robbing those guys of what extra base hits or home runs. And quite frankly, in game 1, in my opinion, his 2 big defensive plays, won the game for the Toronto Jays, let alone what their offense was able to do. And they won going away, but those would have been huge, monumental, momentum-building innings for Tampa Bay that were taken away because of great defense for Toronto. So the defense was extremely impressive, I thought, really from both teams. But Toronto certainly had everything going on the defensive game. And then, the offense came to play. First 2 games, the big bats showed up. Everything that we anticipated that Toronto would bring to the table, they did. And, Tampa looked a little bit like they had a little hangover after they lost that first game Friday. I thought they were flat as fuck Saturday. And I thought, a lot of that was the balloon pops and the wind kind of gets knocked out of the sails, and they had to regroup, and Toronto was still on the front foot and they were able to take it. Tampa Bay, to their credit, able to regroup and at least salvage something out of that series. But really, really impressed with how Toronto not only took it to their AL East rivals, but given the magnitude of the situation, had to play in that pressure. And you knew going in, like, they had that mentality. They didn't want to be the team that the record was broken on for the to start off a season in terms of a winning streak. And they wanted to be that team to knock off Tampa Bay. And they took that fight to them right from game 1. You could tell that they came out swinging, that they came out ready to go, that they weren't playing on the back foot. They were not scared of their AL East rivals. And this, to me, has all the ingredients of being a really, really sexy race down the stretch. And it's going to be probably not the first time that we do a preview/review of a Jays Rays series throughout the course of the pod.
Yeah, for sure. How about that AL East, though? Holy cow. Everybody's 500 or better. Even the Red Sox have gotten to 500. They're 10-10. And you've got Baltimore's 4 games over, Toronto's 3 games over, the Yankees 5 games over, and of course the Rays at 13 games over 500. What a race that AL East is shaping up to be, because I kind of thought the Red Sox were going to fade pretty early and stay faded, but it looks like that AL East is going to be really tough, and they've got a lot of really, really good baseball teams.
Well, and I don't know about you, but I had zero expectations for Baltimore after their offseason. I didn't really anticipate Baltimore to continue to play at the level that they played at last season. And they've proven that even though they didn't go out and get the big names, they didn't go out and make a splash, there's still a lot of optimism and belief in that clubhouse, and
Yep.
they've started strong, and more power to them. They're another surprising team. I thought it was going to be a 3-horse race from the word go, and it's turning out to be at least 4, maybe even 5 if Boston can continue to work a little magic. I think there's a lot of smoke and mirrors happening in Boston right now.
Yeah.
But if Boston can continue to play strong baseball, and if maybe they go out and spend a little cash here in the near future, it might be all 5, all hands on deck in the American League East, and that's exciting. That's exciting for baseball.
For sure. I had one thought. It slipped my mind. I'll come back to it if I remember it. But I'm going to go ahead and review my series, and we're going to harken back to something we brought to the table last week.
Texas.
So Texas had an opportunity to, make a statement against Houston. And the previous week, the Diamondbacks had an opportunity to make a statement against the Dodgers. And the Diamondbacks told the Dodgers, there's a new sheriff in town.
Yes, it's still there.
And that's what the Rangers went out and did. 2 out of 3 against Houston, and they didn't let it get to their heads. They've played, I think, a game over 500 since. Won 2 more series. They swept the Phillies in a short 2-game series. Other than a little bit of a stumble, I believe it was against the Orioles. Since then, they dropped 2 of 3 against the Orioles. And the Cubbies actually got a couple from them, but they've been solid since. Or no, those were all before. Actually, I'm reading the schedule backwards. So, swept the Royals. That's what happened. Swept the Royals after the Astros. So apologies for that. I went backwards, but they did not let the big series win over the Astros go to their heads and kind of fall back to earth. And they are threatening, honestly, to kind of disappear on the rest of the AL West. The Angels, after a really good start, have fallen to pieces. The Astros are scuffling. They haven't really put it together yet. And 3.5 game lead right now, and the Rangers are playing good baseball. Pitching well. DeGrom's nicked up. It's fucking what DeGrom does. But they've been pitching pretty well, and they've got some young guys that have supplemented that lineup. They're scoring a lot of runs. They're pretty dangerous. They're young. They're flashy. Marcus Semien, is anybody hotter than him to start the season? He had a stretch where he had 3 straight games with a home run, hit a grand slam against the Astros in game 3 of that series. They really have been raking, and they made a statement against an Astros team that it seems that they were ripe for the picking because they've been kind of scuffling out the gates, and Texas took advantage. And we talked about it. They highlighted it during that series. ESPN, they had Sunday Night Baseball with the Texas-Houston game, and they were highlighting the managers. We talked about how big of an addition Bruce Bochy was for that team. And he did what Bruce Bochy does during that game I watched the entirety of Sunday night's game. And he managed the bullpen. And that's what Bruce does. He knows how to use arms. He knows when to pull strings. He knows when to put guys in. And it was a masterful performance by a masterful manager. And maybe the most important move of the offseason for the AL West, honestly, was Bruce Bochy joining the ranks there in Texas.
You mentioned about the bullpen strings and playing it to perfection, because, I'll go back to St. Louis, and Ollie Marmol is still a young up-and-coming manager versus Bruce Bochy, who has been there, done that. And there is a stark contrast when I watch St. Louis versus Texas, who is the second hottest team in baseball minus the Atlanta Braves right now in terms of what they've compiled over the last 2 weeks of the season. But you mentioned the Sunday night game and the bullpen management, and here's where it really comes into play, because as I'm watching the Rangers, there are scenarios and situations in games where, as a fan, you start to sense this could be a pivotal swing and this arm might be on its last leg. And when you sense that, oftentimes it's a 3-run shot and then it's the yank. When you watch Rangers baseball, the last 10 games especially, I've never got to that point because that arm gets pulled before that even happens. Bochy has that almost sixth sense.
Yeah, he's got a knack for it.
To know when that scenario is going to come up, to know when to yank. And for the Rangers, I think the early portion of the season, you saw guys that were getting visibly frustrated when they got pulled, but the bullpen came and closed the deal. And not only is it knowing when to do that, but it's also having confidence in the guys that you call into that situation to be able to close that situation out and to get you into your next inning. And he does it miraculously well. Whereas St. Louis is the exact opposite. It's like, oh God, here we go again. Hicks is in trouble. He's clearly stressing. And there goes a 3-run shot. And now we've lost the lead. And it's the bottom of the 8th. And we got to figure out how to, and we just don't, it doesn't get done. You don't see it in Texas. On the flip side, let's talk about the Astros for a second, because I want to pose you a question.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people are talking about the panic button in Houston. A lot of people are saying it's an under 500 team, which nobody expected to start off and to be nearing May, having the Houston Astros, the defending World Series champions, under 500.
I had them winning 100 games.
I want to know how much they missed Justin Verlander.
A lot.
I think that's got a lot to do with it.
Yep.
And
yeah, I think it's about it. I think it's I talked about how much I thought he brought value to the Mets, so much so that I picked him to win the Cy Young about 5 hours before he was put on the DL. Of course, the Rosinbaggers curse strikes, right?
Right.
In fact, I think it was like the moment after I said it, they announced it, and then they had to fax the paperwork, and it took time for them to actually put it out to the public. So, anyway, I think that they miss him a ton, and that was part of the reason why I thought that he would be a guy that would be a steadying force for the Mets, that they would be able to absorb some of the losses they had in their rotation with Bassett, especially leaving, who was a pretty big piece of that rotation last year. And then, of course, the DeGrom loss, who I guess you could call that a loss, but the Mets never had him anyway. I think that not only is he a good arm for them, I also think he's a steadying force in that locker room, which is what I thought he brought to the Mets. And they miss that. They're young in a lot of places. They're young in that rotation, especially down there in Houston. And I think they've got tremendous arms. I just think that they don't have that bulldog that during his off days is going to be putting his arm around these guys and mentoring them and teaching them the ways of grinding through a 162 game, 25 to 30 start season. And they miss that a lot. And you can't put a value on that. You just can't until you realize what you've lost. It's hard to put a value on that, honestly. And you're absolutely right. I think that they miss him a ton.
Irregardless of statistical allure, what he brings to the clubhouse, I think is one of the missing ingredients.
Yep.
Houston this year.
I agree completely. And it's probably a big reason why they're scuffling out of the gates.
Mm-hmm.
All right, let's shift gears to this week. I know you've got a series you'd like to talk about. I do not, so I'm going to pass your way, and I'm going to get out of the way.
Right. Well, you can jump in and join in anytime because we are focusing right back on those Houston Astros. This one has a lot of sexiness to it. Not only is it the 2021 World Series rematch, it's also a matchup of the last two World Series teams. The Atlanta Braves and the Houston Astros getting set for a gigantic weekend clash that should have plenty of eyeballs on it. And again, when you're talking about two teams that we widely expected, and I believe I predicted to be in the World Series here in 2023, but it's two teams that are completely going in the opposite direction right now. Atlanta is doing what we all anticipated Atlanta to do, and that's mash and have an extremely high run differential at plus 32 right now. Yeah. And the almost 11 games over 500. What are they? 15-5, 14-5, something like that.
14-5. Yep.
14-5. Extremely good baseball team. They are as advertised, everything we thought they were. And to that credit, so is Houston, but Houston hasn't put it on display.
Yep.
Houston hasn't shown very well. We look at that lineup, and on paper, you're like, okay, well, this is going to be a great series. But Houston has not played up their potential. And I'm almost wondering if a little eye-to-eye contact with a World Series contender, with a team that you have recently had World Series history with, maybe rattles the cage a little bit, wakes Houston up, and gets Houston to be playing good ball. Because right now, again, Houston under 500 in the American League West. And when you take a look at the grand scope of and seeing what the American League East is doing, I'm not counting games and putting this in terms of a wild card perspective. But I'm saying if Houston wants to get back in the game, wants to announce that we're going to run with Texas and it's going to be a 1-2 show, I think they have to show up this weekend. And I think if Atlanta does what they certainly have the capability to do, and that's just dust them off and sweep them under the rug, then I think Houston is going to have a lot more questions and answers come Monday morning. If they drop a 3-game series to the Braves, a potential World Series contender, when you have World Series expectations, you are going to have questions to answer on Monday because you have that measuring stick, you got the ruler out, and you're not even close. This is a huge series for the Astros, maybe more so than the Braves. Now, on the Braves' perspective, you show up, you play well, it only validates the fact that everybody had you as a front runner. It only validates the pundits who put them towards the top. But for Houston, it's show up or get the fuck out of the way right now. And so that, I think it's really, again, palatable from the perspective of these are two teams that have been there. These are two franchises that not only have been to the big stage, have continued to have very strong rosters here in 2023. And arguably are going to run again and make deep postseason runs. But one team has gotten off to a shaky start, gotten slow out of the gates, a lot like my racehorses that I pick a lot of times in those big purse prizes at the ponies. Just slow out of the gates. I blame the jockeys all the time, but Houston hasn't shown well. Atlanta has. It's two teams going in the opposite direction, but at the same time, two favorites, and it's an extremely sexy matchup this weekend.
Yeah, big time. The talent on the field speaks for itself, right? And I think that's the big thing that you're still going to hold on to for this in terms of a series of two teams that do have that, right? World Series pedigree, but also World Series expectations. Like I mentioned a moment ago, picked Houston to win 100 games. I think you had them winning 100 or almost 100 games as well. Yeah. And certainly right there in terms of potentially being in the World Series. I had the Blue Jays from the AL going to the World Series against the Braves, so we were pretty close in terms of on who we had, and I certainly expect Houston to be in the conversation when it's all said and done. But we just talked a moment ago. I think Houston's scuffling, and you might be absolutely right. Right, you get the big dog, in locking horns in a series, in a 3-game series here. Maybe it does rattle the cage. Maybe it does wake them up. Maybe it's the smelling salts that they need. However many more metaphors I can use, right, to say that maybe this is the series they need to really start to feel like baseball's here and we're ready to play. I thought maybe it would have been the Rangers. I was afraid that it might have been the Rangers last week because I'm still holding on to that stock I bought last year, and it's starting to come around for me. And I was worried that the Astros might say, okay, now we're playing a contender in the AL West. And they just didn't, right? They took a game off them, but it wasn't their best series. Maybe this is the one. Maybe this is the one that wakes them up. But it's a tall task right now to knock off the Braves. We talked a lot about the Rays out the gate, and they kind of overshadowed the fact that the Braves are doing basically what we expected them to do, and they're still on pace for what I said. Mm-hmm. On pace for 119 right now. So we'll see. This is going to be a great series, and one of these two teams is going to leave this series feeling really, really good about themselves. The other one, if it's Houston and they get knocked off in this series, they might start looking to say, okay, what do we got to do? Is it making a move? Is it shuffling the lineup? Is it shuffling the rotation? Maybe having some guys miss starts and move some guys around and spot start. I don't know, right? Dusty's going to have to start thinking about that, because if the Braves do come in and dust them off, as you said, they have the potential to, right? They certainly could, as good as the Braves are. It's going to start feeling dark really early for the Houston Astros after this series, because especially if the Rangers continue to play good baseball, because they're just going to continue to win games.
I'll give you one number, 451. And when I say 451, I mean 451. That's the rotation that the Astros get. There's a little breath of fresh air. They're getting the Braves 4-5, and then Sunday with the ace with Maxey. But
still got to pitch to that lineup.
Right. Also Also true, but you are drawing the
Yes.
bottom half of the rotation, which is
Yep.
a little bit of a relief for
Yep.
Houston.
Yep.
And so if you're the Astros,
Opportunities knocking.
opportunities knocking, and kind of want to make a statement too. But I think at this point, when you're under 500 ball, and we've both been there, we've both been on teams that have been sub 500. Obviously, our short seasons are a hell of a lot shorter than 160 games. But on the same token, even if it's not convincing victories on a sub 500 team are all you need to go to get going in the right direction.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Just something to feel like there's light at the end of the tunnel for sure. And if the Astros can make a statement against the Braves, I think that certainly bodes well for them in terms of turning this slow start around.
For sure.
All right, before we get to our stock quotes for the week, let's do our Folds of Honor, salute to service. Every episode we dedicate to a fallen service member, veteran-owned podcast. Every episode dedicated to a fallen service member. We call it our Folds of Honor, salute to service. All right. This episode goes out to Marine Corps Captain Moises A. Navas. Died March 8th, 2020, serving during Operation Inherent Resolve. At the time of his death, Captain Navas was 34, hailing out of Germantown, Maryland. Died as a result of small arms fire while clearing a tunnel complex of Islamic State fighters in Makhmur Mountains of southern Iraq. Captain Navas had been awarded the Purple Heart, the Joint Services Commendation Medal, the Navy and Marine Corps Commendation Medal, the Navy and Marine Corps Achievement Medal, Combat Action Ribbon, 2 Good Conduct Medals, and the Outstanding Volunteer Service Medal. Captain Navas, we have the watch. All right, let's turn on our tickers here. Let's talk a little bit about some stocks that we might like to invest in. Now I can't find it. Where do they go? There. I'm failing hard on managing this week. Stove does such a flawless fucking job with this.
I'm hand it over to the bullpen and it all goes to shit.
Calling the lefty and they're fucking bringing. All right, let's talk about some investments. I feel like I need to get like a cigar, like a bowler cap, and like one of those old timey cash like receipt things, and the bow tie. Yeah, absolutely.
Well, Ken Rosenthal bow tie here as we go to the stock market and take a look at what's good. I tell you, baby, you gotta sell the stock. Well, I also feel like you can't listen to that intro when you're hungover because that would be the absolute world.
That would be brutal.
With headphones on, listening to this podcast. Ding, 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 ding. Jesus. Tequila day. God.
I don't know how they deal with that every morning at fucking 10 a.m. in Wall Street, dude. They got to be so hungover and coked out. Isn't that what Wall Street does?
I mean, Matthew McConaughey pretty much gave us the script, right? Revolutions and Tootskis. Yeah.
Absolutely. All right, let's talk about your stock, your investment this week. Selling, buying, what are we doing?
We are going to be buying and we're going to be grabbing the popcorn out as well. So not only are you going to be buying stock in the San Diego Padres, you're also going to be buying stock in Act 2 popcorn. I don't know. I'm just making one up off the top of my head. Orville Redenbacher's, if you will. That's probably a more familiar brand name. Go buy stock in that too because you're going to need a lot of it because guess what? The return tonight, finally, after fuck up last year, Fernando Tatis is back, baby. And oh my God, what a long wait for baseball fans to get a star of the game back in play. I mean, not only was this an excruciating watch from the standpoint of you looked at San Diego last year and you're like, damn, that's a good team.
Yeah.
Be a hell of a lot better if you had Fernando Tatis on it. Damn, you had Xander Bogaerts to start off the year. That's pretty cool. It doesn't have the it factor. It doesn't have the Tatis factor. It doesn't have the shine, the showtime, the pop, and the flair and the pizzazz that Fernando Tatis draws. Every single fucking at bat that he steps into the box is immediate, can't miss TV. And Petco Park at night with Fernando Tatis in prime time is prime viewing for any baseball fan. And if you're going to sit down and say, this is the game in 2023, if you ask me to identify one at bat that says, what is baseball in 2023? I'm going to say, watch fucking Jacob deGrom go up against Fernando Tatis and tell me that you are not entertained. It is can't miss, action-packed TV, but it has been a struggle to get to this point. Because as we know, it has been a very long road for Fernando Tatis that dates back to the COVID era of all things. Team doctors and players, for whatever fucking reason, and I still will never understand this, could not communicate during the pandemic era that we all went through, and thank God have pulled through. But Fernando Tatis rides a bike because he's young, dumb, and stupid, and fucking screws up his shit and can't go to team doctors. So by the time they get to spring training, he's like, oh, by the way, I had a biking accident and this has been lingering for X number of time. And then the doctors finally got him enough medical care to get him back on the road to rehab. And then on that road to rehab, he goes rogue a second time and says, I'm going to take this substance. I'm not going to consult my team doctors about it. I'm just going to do it because I got a friend from a friend from a friend from a friend that told me that this was going to work. And
to treat ringworm.
Hello. Like, don't, he's young, dumb, and stupid. And I think he's gotten over that because 2 years away from the game will do that to you and we'll wake you the hell up. But here's the deal. Like, again, you watch him in the minor leagues and you have to understand that, yeah, he hit 3 dingers in one game in a minor league baseball game, but it's also a minor league baseball game when you have the best player in Major League Baseball in the minors. And there's a reason why he had 3 dingers in a game. But at the same time, we were all kind of expecting it. And I even kind of alluded to it in the preseason pod. I go, he's not going to come back and be Fernando Tatis on day one after this injury, after this really extremely excruciatingly long layoff. But every indication that I've got to this point based on watching him in film and watching him in the batting cage was like, oh shit. Like
maybe he will be.
He didn't miss a beat. And San Diego is going to be really, really freaking good. And now I need, from a stock market perspective, to be able to eat a little crow to make a positive gain down the road. And we're going to have to take a little bit of pride and a little bit of our ego, and we're going to have to shove it aside because we're in the stock game, baby. And the stock game's all about making cash now. And we can't sit and go, well, I got to stick to my guns and I got to stick to no, screw all that. It's the stock market, baby. Turn on yourself, because if you can't turn on yourself, you can't turn on your buddies. You got to turn on yourself first, lie to yourself a little bit, realize that you were effing wrong, and say, you know what? San Diego is the stock that I want to buy in, because San Diego is probably the team that's going to beat Los Angeles in the NL West and probably going to make a run in the playoffs and be in the NLCS when it's all said and done with the Atlanta Braves. Buy stock now in San Diego. The Tatis return only intensifies what has already been some pretty damn good baseball from them, minus some pretty key pitchers in that starting rotation. So they're not done building yet, which is another reason to buy. There's still more pieces that are going to come into this puzzle to be really, really good.
Yeah.
In San Diego now. The other thing I'll say about this Fernando Tatis, and you mentioned it on the last pod, that not only has baseball been more interesting to you, but it has also gotten you like involved in other baseball activities that you wouldn't normally do, like the MLB The Show, for instance. I'm an MLB The Show freak, and I play it way too much to admit how many hours I actually put in on this podcast. I can tell you from the gaming standpoint, the last 2 years has sucked because the one player that I wanted to play with on MLB The Show isn't even available because the show, for whatever self-righteous reason, is so accurate and so realistic that if you have a suspended player, they won't include him on the game and they will add him later on when he actually becomes
So
officially.
they do a live update.
Well, I'm waiting for Friday's update, which is planned and is anticipated to have the show. I haven't been able to play it because I'm like, why would I start a franchise right now when the best damn player in the game isn't out of suspension yet? So I've literally held off on playing the game that I love. It has so many effects that are going to bring up so much positive energy and so much excitement. And honestly, the biggest thing that I can't wait for, no offense, is this pod to get over so I can go watch Padres tonight because Tatis is back. Get your popcorn and buy some stock.
Absolutely. Yeah, they're exciting, right? They've got a lot of star power there, but maybe the biggest star power has been sitting out because it's not just his ability on the field. It's what else he brings. He's kind of the ambassador of flair and flash. There were kind of the Jose Bautistas and, some of those guys that were a little bit flashy with things like bat flips. But I think Fernando's kind of the first guy that really said, I'm out here to have fun. I'm going to trot. I'm going to dance. I'm going to pimp home runs. I'm going to show you up because I'm having fun. And I'm not going to get mad at you if you do the same thing to me. I'm excited to have that back because Jazz Chisholm is that guy too. And of course we're kind of without him for a little bit here. I love the energy that these young and as a baseball purist, a lot of people are surprised when I say that. A lot of people were surprised I was so excited about the pitch clock, the game clock,
right? Because
I think when you talk about being a baseball purist or a really traditional fan, you sort of get lumped in as a curmudgeon, right? And I get it because a lot of old timey baseball purists can be kind of curmudgeonly. But no, it's exciting, it's flashy. I'm excited. I'm excited for that. I just wish Juan Soto was playing a little better right now because that lineup would be so fun to watch.
But how much better will Juan Soto be?
I think you're right.
You know what I mean? When Tatis gets into the lineup, I think that
takes so much pressure off of him.
And Xander's the same way. Xander could explode. He's got every potential to have his stock also go through the roof because you add another bat and you take pressure off and then you add base runners and you get RBI opportunities. And I think that this team can really come to life offensively. And the fact that not all the pieces are in place from the pitching staff rotation and are still getting put together makes this really palatable. But you mentioned the Tatis factor and again, I always liken it to if I'm taking a baseball person or a prospective baseball fan who says, okay, what is this game? You've made rule changes. It's quick. It's 2.5 hours. I might be able to sit through this. Tell me a little bit about this. I can't tell you the game of baseball in 2023 without telling you about Fernando Tatis Jr. because he's one of the best athletes. And with one of the best athletes missing, it's missing a part of that story. And this story can now be told because of that return, and it's super exciting.
Just stop being a knucklehead, Fernando.
Oh, shit. And that's the thing. I think Fernando Tatis has an extremely bright future in this sport if Fernando Tatis can stay out of Fernando Tatis's way.
Yep.
And it goes back to our stock watch last week. Milwaukee has an extremely bright future if their front office stays the fuck out of the way.
Until they trade it away.
It's the same concept. If if Fernando Tatis gets a little mentoring, and you hope it comes in the form of a Nelson Cruz or a Xander Bogaerts or a guy that's been around and has been there, done that, and is a superstar of the sport. If he can just get a little guidance and a little mentoring, and if he can be willing to accept the guidance and mentoring and not be, I'm fucking Fernando Tatis. Why would I listen to you? I have all the glitz, the glamour, the rides, the money. I don't need to listen. He needs to take a little slice of humble pie. And if he does, the sky's the limit for him.
Yes.
And the sky's the limit for the Padres, which is, again, circling back. Buy all the stock. Buy it all. Buy it all.
Buy it up.
And then let's go to Petco for a night game because that'd be fun. Yeah.
By the way, you instructed me to remind you of something tonight. I want all those baseball fans out there
Yes, thank you, because I would have forgotten.
to simply remember this. The Chicago White Sox once had Fernando Tatis Jr. in their farm system. The Chicago White Sox proceeded to trade Fernando Tatis Jr. away as part of a deal to acquire James Shields at the end of his career. Now, this wasn't big game James from his days with Tampa Bay. This wasn't big game James who always showed up in the moment. This was James Shield at the tail end of his career, who was obviously flailing with the San Diego Padres, and they traded Fernando Tatis Jr. away to get James Shields.
There he is. It's his autograph. That's James Shields' autograph. This is currently sitting in my office that is worth about $3. James Big Game Shields was a extremely great pitcher in his 1 year prime that he had. Started to tail off. I got his autograph. I was super excited. He's one of the first players that I met when I was watching the Tampa Bay Rays. They were playing the Kansas City Royals Minnesota. And I went down and I got James Shields' autograph, and I felt like I was the king of the world. And the next year, he gets traded away to the White Sox, and then the next year, he's shit. I'm like, what the hell? No, it's Padres, and then the White Sox, and then it ended, and then this is worth $3, and Fernando Tatis was the guy you traded. The Cardinals organization has made some historically bad trades over the years. We lost Randy Arozarena at one point.
They never did that.
We've never given away Fernando Tatis, a legacy player. What are you doing?
Oh,
Big Game Shields, man. I think it's like one of probably one person that's hung on to his autograph throughout the years. Most people trash it. Great.
Oh man. All right. So I want to bring this show to a close in maybe the most appropriate fashion possible with the news breaking of a legend of the sport being designated for assignment. It's a very inglorious end to a very glorious career. Madison Bumgarner was one of the most fun players to watch. He was a bulldog on the mound. He would let you know when he was barking. He would let you know when he was about to bite. But he was also so fun to watch at the plate. I don't know how many games in San Francisco when they had that team that was just so lights out on the mound and so lights out defensively that they won games 1-2-3-0 all the time. How many times did Mad Bum not only throw an 8-inning fucking gem, but he'd have a home run in the game, and it would be the only run or runs that they scored in that game. He was the king of that. And I just wanted for us on the Rosinbaggers pod to pay the proper respects here and close out this episode with a big salute to one of the legends of the game during his time. It's been unfortunate his time in Arizona. He hasn't been able to recapture any of that. And it really is an inglorious end. It often doesn't end the way we want it to with these guys. They're alpha dogs and they want to stick around as long as possible. The money's really good too. I don't fault anybody for cashing some checks, but Mad Bum, what a great career. Ty, I want to pass your way. Any thoughts on Mad Bum here as we have to watch kind of the unceremonious end of his career?
I'll give you twofold because I'm always the eternal optimist in every scenario. First, on Mad Bum's illustrious career, which was only amplified and magnified in October, which was a skill and a trait that not a lot of Major League Baseball players have. When there's another gear, when the scenario is at its peak, when the situation is at its greatest, when everything is on the line, when he was in his prime, with the San Francisco Giants, there was nobody else that you would have envisioned or imagined having the ball in that scenario. You gave it to Mad Bum, and he got the job done. He was a part of that Tim Lincecum rotation as well, and with the freak and what he could throw. But given the choice between the two of them in a pressure situation, you gave it to Steady Eddie. You gave it to the guy that was going to get you 8, the guy that just seemingly never fatigued despite the pitch count. I'm pretty sure the guy could have thrown for 150 in his prime and turned around the next day and threw a bullpen session. He was that good. Obviously, age caught up with them, and scouting reports certainly with this time in Arizona. And I think really the ballpark itself caught up with him in his time with the D-backs. I'm going to make one case that we can end on a positive note here. And I don't think it would take that much wiggle room for San Francisco to say, come back, get the ball, throw one more time. And I don't care if it's one more inning, but let's let you retire right. Nobody wants to end their career, and certainly nobody wants, and I don't think any baseball fan, even if you got your ass kicked by Mad Bum, wants to see it end by going as a DFA through the minor leagues and ultimately into free agency and into a baseball oblivion. We need to see, as baseball fans, Mad Bum get the bump one time, one inning, maybe it's one fucking pitch. But the lasting image that I want to see with Mad Bum is tipping that cap to the crowd in a Giants uniform.